Headed down the shore? Skip the hassle. Let Beach Caddy handle the heavy lifting. Bellhop and beach cart rentals are available in Ocean City, Sea Isle, Avalon, Stone Harbor, and Wildwood. Use the promo code Jimbo for 10% off bellhop and cart rentals. Beach Caddy takes the stress out of your Jersey Shore trip. Go to beachcaddy.app. Use the promo code Jimbo for 10% off your move in, move out bellhop service and beach cart rentals. Best beach carts at the Jersey Shore. What's up, everyone? Welcome to this day in Philly Sports History for July 18th, 2025. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to a Feel Good Friday edition of the podcast. Having a little bit of an echo issue today. Not sure why. I think it's because of the walls around me here, but last day here in Ocean City. Going to be a hot one, but you can probably hear the waves crashing. It's nice. Don't forget, if you're going to the Jersey Shore, that Beach Caddy promo will get you 15% off of your move in, move out service, as well as your beach cart rental. So use that promo code Jimbo to take 15% off. And we got a big show, as we always do here on a Feel Good Friday. And the Phillies are back tonight. More on them in a minute. But lots of other things going on in Philly sports. And if you haven't read this yet, I saw it on ESPN. There's an article about Joel Embiid written by Dotan Ikintoye, I think is how you pronounce his last name. Excuse me. But he spent the better part of a year with Joe, talking with him, getting to know him, things like that. And to be honest, it's a good read. I do feel, depending on where you come down in the Joel camp, it's probably not going to change your perception too much on him. But for me, who you guys all know, I've been trusting the process since the very beginning. It does open your eyes a little bit on it, more so on his work ethic and how he's grown into really wanting to be and being one of the best players when healthy ever in the NBA. Um, but I guess the biggest takeaway for me was just how dysfunctional the Sixers were and pretty much are still as an organization. I talk about the Cowboys all the time being a dumpster fire, and I joked a lot last year about the Sixers being in the same boat. But man, they really are a dumpster fire. It just shows how early on in his career they pretty much the way they treated him. They wanted him to kind of force things, the way they lost him for a couple months. He just wouldn't get back to them. But what does it mean for this season? Uh, he made it clear he's coming back this time on his own timeline. The guy even asked, like, well, did the Sixers know about this? He was like, well, we haven't really spoken about it. But Daryl Morey, who has said he'll be ready for training camp, Joe's like, we don't have a timeline, which I think is good. So he has in his mind, like, he's very concerned with legacy and things like that. So I think he's going to come back when he's ready. Maybe he takes a lesser role. He seemed really bothered about his perception in the playoffs because his numbers dropped and how people will say, oh, you only care about the MVP award. But he did point out, and I think correctly so, that there are times in the playoffs where he's getting double teamed as soon as he steps over midcourt and then is making sure the other guys are getting the ball. So, like I said, I recommend it. It's a longer read. But that was my big takeaway on his timeline. He seems like he's still pissed off about the team meeting from last year, uh, leaking it, which I get. I also feel like the fact that you had to get called out by Tyrese Maxey, that's kind of one of those things. He is in therapy now, so hopefully that helps him get through whatever it is he's going through. Talked about how hurt he really was in that Knicks series and how he basically could barely walk. Uh, James Harden doesn't talk to him anymore. That seems to bother him. Uh, what does it mean for this year? Who knows? This whole season is dependent upon how that knee heals and how he rehabs and comes back. So I do highly recommend the read. So it's on ESPN, and like I said, it's a long one, but kind of is a really eye opener when it comes to what Joe has done and just how he's matured and grown as a player in the NBA. So I do highly recommend that. The other big story still is Shane Gillis at the ESPYs, and he's dude's getting skewered, and I think everybody needs to relax. And this isn't a political rant by any stretch of the imagination, but what his jokes and his monologue, they were smart. If you take a minute, some of them weren't as funny as others, but if you take a minute and really dive into what he was trying to say, like it, it was good. I think as a society, just need to toughen up and just enjoy life. Some of the jokes, like I said, they were funny, they were smart. Some of them just didn't land the way they may, but I think people just need to stop being uncomfortable and be comfortable being uncomfortable and realize that this dude was funny. The other Eagles story was Brian Bremen passed away from a rare form, aggressive form of brain cancer, and he was a special teams player for that Super Bowl 52 winning team. Made a big hit on that last kickoff that really pinned the Patriots back. So condolences to his family and uh, sending thoughts and prayers and well wishes. He leaves two little girls behind, but very sad to hear. And again, it was a very rare and aggressive form. So, condolences to Brian Bremen's family. All right, yesterday's trivia answer. I asked you, Steve Carlton had 19 seasons with 100 more strikeouts. I asked who were ahead of him or tied with him, and the list goes Nolan Ryan, Roger Clemens, Greg Maddux, Don Sutton, and Burt Blyleven, who is tied with Steve Carlton for fifth spot. So thank you to everybody who reached out on the Discord and threw out their guesses. We'll have another trivia question here later in the show. But as I mentioned, the Phillies are back finally. They welcome hometown hero Mike Trout to Citizens Bank tonight as they take on the Angels for a weekend series. Jesus Luzardo pitches tonight, Taiwan Walker tomorrow, and Ranger Suarez on Sunday as they look to get back into somewhat, and now that the West Coast trip is over, get somewhat back into a winning ways, and the trade deadline is 2 weeks away. So we'll see what Dave has up his sleeves.
It's time for Fridays with AI, where we ask AI to rewrite Philly sports history. Every Friday, only on This Day in Philly Sports History.
That's right. It is time for Fridays with AI. That's what we do every Friday. Fridays with AI is brought to you by Philly Goat. And in honor of the Phillies being back, they're past the halfway point, but the All-Star game is typically like the unofficial halfway point for the season. I asked AI to grade the Phillies players. Now I'm not going to go through the full 40-man roster, but AI did grade the full 40-man roster. I'll give you their grades and kind of give you my commentary on them. And start with the catchers. They gave JT a C plus. They said defensively he was solid, but his offense was kind of lacking this year. He's been slightly better recently. I don't necessarily disagree with that, and I would argue that his defense has been not up to his usual standards, but C plus seems about right. They give Marshawn a D, um, basically because he's worse than JT both offensively and defensively. I might go D minus on that, to be honest. He's had like moments, but I don't know. But hard to argue with their grades for the catchers. Now for the infield, and right off the bat, I'm going to disagree. They give Bryce a B plus. Uh, that's very high for Bryce. I guess I know he was dealing with the injury. I give him a C minus at best, maybe even an incomplete due to the fact that he was injured. But that seems very high for Bryce. I don't know if it's recency bias because of the 4 extra base hit game against the Padres, but B plus seems very high for Bryce. And then move to Bryson Stott. They give him a D plus. Uh, his only saving grace is his defense. He's been horrible. There's no other way to put it. He's been horrible offensively. Um, I think D plus is kind of high. His defense is outstanding. Um, I wouldn't give him the plus. I would give him a solid D, with the caveat that defensively he's probably like an A or a B. And then we move to Trey Turner. AI gives him an A minus, basically for his consistency, which he's been pretty consistent this year on offense. I don't know if it took into account his defense though. And I think the way he's cost them a few runs in a couple games this year, I'd bring that grade down to a B, mostly due to his offense. Defensively, I think he was a D. So little high on Trey Turner there from AI. Move over to Bomer. AI gives him a B minus, and I agree. He got off to a slow start. He's been great defensively, much better offensively recently. I think a B minus is a good solid grade for Bomer. And then on to the outfield. He gives Max Kepler a D, and I think that's being very generous. He's an F minus. 100%. He's that kid in class that didn't turn in any work, and you have to give him a 50% to not pull his average down. Absolutely horrible. DFA him. I'm over Max Kepler. He whines. Get him out of here. Brandon Marsh, they give a C minus. He's been better recently, and I think that might be a little hard. I'd give him a solid C, probably, maybe, depending on how he comes out here after the All Star break, a C plus. But again, hard to argue with a C minus, especially the way he's been inconsistent. And again, he was injured early too. So if you take out the injury, like the pre-injury, maybe he's a C plus. Nick Castellanos, they give a B minus. They said his defense is what's holding this grade down, and I think it's hard to argue. I might go C plus on this one. He's frustrating, but he is at this point in his career. He is what he is. So I think it might be a little high. Schwarber, they give an A. They said he's the best hitter on the team. He has been more patient this year, really the only power hitter on the team right now. And I agree that he deserves an A. He's been the most consistent player on the Phillies this year. And then on to the pitching staff. And I mean, starting pitching, AI gave high grades to. Wheeler got an A plus, Ranger an A, Christopher Sanchez an A. 100% agree with that. They get A's across the board. Luzardo, they give a B minus. They said he's solid, but he's inconsistent. And I would agree with that. I think a B minus is the perfect grade for him. He's either great or horrible. There's no in between with Jesus Luzardo. Hopefully tonight, though, he's all good. They did grade Aaron Nola and gave him a D. That's way too high. I think you either give him an incomplete or an F based on how, now whether or not those injuries uh, held him back early in the season. I don't know, but a D is just too high for Nola because that's how bad he was. I think it was so long ago we tend to forget that, but he was bad, bad. So I think I'd give him an incomplete, but definitely a D is too high. Romano, they gave an F to. 100% agree. I put him in the same boat with Kepler. Get him the hell out of here. Little Dicky can go. What can I say about Romano that hasn't already been said? Banks and Strom, they give a B plus to. I think both of those grades are pretty high. I'd give them both a C. Banks has been better recently. Strom seems to really be impacted by the fact that Alvarado isn't there, who, sorry, but Alvarado's a scumbag for doing what he did. And then the other reliever we'll talk about is Kirkering. They give him a solid B. Uh, I I tend to think that's a little high. I'd probably give him a C plus because he's inconsistent. Although the last time we saw him, it wasn't necessarily his fault. The Giants game, that was the ump was just terrible. Um, I'd probably give Kirkering a higher grade than both Strom and Banks, just because he's been fairly consistent since Alvarado's been out. Uh, so there's AI's grades. I think some of them he's way too high on. I think this analysis was okay. Like the analysis itself was spot on with what they were saying, but I think grade wise it was a little high. and maybe we're tougher because we see it every day. I talk all the time about the eagleification of the Phillies, how we live and die by each game. But I think some of these grades are just too high. I did ask AI then a follow up. I said, "Can you grade Rob Thompson and Dave Dombrowski? Give Rob Thompson an A minus." I'd probably go B plus there because he's playing the hand he's dealt. Maybe even a B. I'd go, but he'd still make some questionable calls, questionable decisions. But when it comes to managing the bullpen, the dude is, I mean, what's he supposed to do? So I think they're a little high on him. And this is the most bizarre one. They gave Dombrowski a B, which is way too high. Uh, your two of your three biggest acquisitions this offseason were Max Kepler and Jordan Romano, and you get a B. Uh, he could still redeem himself depending on what he does in the next 2 weeks, but way too high for Dombrowski. I'd give him a C minus, D plus, because if Luzardo has been inconsistent too, so I can't go. But what are your thoughts on the AI's grading of the Phillies for the first half of the season? Hit me up on the Back to the Future voice and text line 267-495-8531. Get anything else Philly sports related off your chest. Come over to the Discord channel. Started the conversation last night about the grades. Already, people, and nobody even heard the grades yet, but everybody said AI graded them too high. So let me know your thoughts on that. First link in the description of the Discord channel. But that was Fridays with AI post All-Star edition, brought to you by Philly Goat. Go to phillygoat.com. Use that promo code Jim Montgomery to take 10% off your order. phillygoat.com. They have you covered for your Philly sports apparel needs.
Whether you're coaching Little League, crushing your fantasy league, or just rolling up to a bachelor party like a Philly legend, Lotwin Custom Hype Chains bring the energy. Fully customizable, totally unforgettable, and guaranteed to turn you into the MVP of the moment. Great for teams, groomsmen, or anyone who wants to show off with some serious swagger. Go to Lotwin.com, use the promo code TCCPOD, and get 10% off your own custom hype chain. Lotwin, let's get hyped together.
All right, July 18th. And I do want to say, I apologize if I'm starting to sweat a little bit. There's no breeze out here on this porch right now, and it's hot. And I know it's hot at home. It's just hot. It's July on the East Coast. But let's go to July 18th. And first, we're going to go back to 1927. And this is something we don't do often, but the Philadelphia A's were a big part of the baseball history, or are a big part of the baseball history here in Philly. And on this day in 1927, they lost to the Tigers 5-3 out in Detroit. But Ty Cobb, who's in the twilight of his career, spent his last couple seasons in Philly, was playing for the A's this day against his former team. He went 1 for 4, getting hit number 4,000 for his career. He became the first person in Major League Baseball history to have 4,000 hits, was the all-time hits leader with 4,191 until Pete Rose broke it in 1985. So on this day, little Philadelphia Athletics, they lose to the Tigers 5-3, but Ty Cobb gets hit number 4,000 while playing for the Philadelphia A's. And then we're going to go all the way back up to 1983. Speaking of Pete Rose, who was on this team, and on this day in 1983, the Phillies fired manager Pat Corrales, despite the fact that they were in first place. Basically, lack of communication. He was always juggling the lineup. It was frustrating the vets. They were a very old team, nicknamed the Wheeze Kids. And overall, the front office just had dissatisfaction with how the team was performing. And of course, it blames the manager. All this despite being in first place. General Manager Paul Owens, the Pope, named himself the manager. He had managed a little bit for the Phils back in 1972. And then the Phillies promptly went out that night and lost to the Astros 8-2 with Steve Carlton on the mound. However, the Pope did guide them to a 47-30 finish down the stretch. They won the NL pennant, losing to the Orioles in the World Series 4-1. But I have to, it's bizarre, the similarities between the 1983 team and this team. If you think about it, a veteran team, older team, perception of underachieving, the fact that they are in first place, the fact that people are not happy with the way the team in as a whole has been performing. I'm not saying that they're going to do this, but I don't know. Maybe I don't think Dombrowski is going to come out of the general manager's office and coach this team, but there are a lot of parallels to that 83 team and this year's team. But on this day, despite being in first place, the Phillies fire manager, Pat Corrales, basically lack of communications with the players, lineup juggling, and just the whole perception that they were all underachieving and not playing up to their potential did work out well for them in the end. And again, not saying they should fire Rob Thompson. I'm just saying maybe a fresh voice, more consistency, but who knows? But that happened on this day in 1983, which does lead us to today's trivia question. Kind of an easier one. If you are a Phillies fan, maybe you know the first two, but other than Paul Owens in 1983, what other Phillies managers have guided the Phillies to a World Series? Hit me up on the Discord channel, Back to the Future voice and text line, any of my social media, Jimbo_Mott on Twitter and TikTok, Instagram at Philly Jimbo. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel too and continue to spread the word as we grow this thing. But today's trivia question, other than Paul Owens, who took over this day in 1983, what other Phillies managers have guided the Phillies to a World Series? Not a title, just to the World Series. And then finally, today on a Feel Good Friday, our greatest individual season in Philly sports history tournament yesterday. What a doozy of a matchup. I didn't expect this one to be this close, but it was Reggie White, the number 2 seed from 1987, taking down Nick Foles, the number 3 seed from 2013, with 51% of the vote. Went right down to the wire. I was following this on the beach yesterday. The voting went back and forth all day, but Reggie, the number 2 seed from 87, moves on. And then finally, we have our final Phillies regional semifinal matchup. The winner will take on Steve Carlton from 1972. We have the number 1 seed, Mike Schmidt, from 1980. He was the MVP, All-Star, Gold Glove winner. Hit 286, led Major League Baseball with 48 homers, had 121 RBI, slugged 624, had a 1.004 OPS, and of course helped lead the Phillies to their first World Series title, winning the MVP award. He's taken on the 4 seed Roy Halladay from 2010, won the Cy Young, was an All-Star, led the league with 21 wins against 10 losses. 2.44 ERA in 250 and 2/3 innings pitched, struck out 219, 9 complete games with 4 shutouts, and of course threw a perfect game against the Marlins, and then in his first ever playoff start, no-hit the Reds. Now it's your turn. Whose season was better? Mike Schmidt from 1980, Roy Halladay from 2010. Get your votes in. It's the last matchup of the Phillies regional semifinal, I should say. The winner takes on Steve Carlton from 1972. Be sure, like I said, to like, subscribe, leave a comment, review, all that other good stuff. And then don't forget, we are proud members here at This Day in Philly Sports History of the Clashing Conferences Sports Fan Network. Go to clashingconferences.com for details on what they have to offer and how you can join the team. On this day in 1983, Phillies fire manager Pat Corrales, general manager Paul Owens took over, guided them to the World Series. And again, lots of parallels to this team. Back in 1927, the A's lost to the Tigers 5-3, but Ty Cobb gets hit number 4,000, becoming the first player in Major League Baseball history to do that. We spent Fridays with AI. AI is an easy grader apparently on the Phillies, but let me know your thoughts on Phillies grade and what grade would you give these players as well. We'll be back on Monday when we rewind the weekend. Phillies Angels this weekend. Hopefully we get some updates. The Eagles get their Super Bowl rings today. We'll talk about what they look like and anything that came out of it. I know C.J. Gardner-Johnson's going to be there. Likely Josh Sweat will be there. So it should be a good time to celebrate one last time before training camp the Super Bowl win. The Union play. I knew there was something else. The Union play as well. Condolences to Brian Bremen and his family. This has been this day in Philly sports history for July 18th, 2025. My name's Jim Montgomery. Go have yourselves a feel-good Friday. Stay cool out there. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.